Tonight, beneath the sprawling dome of Tattersall's, a history older than the memory of any living soul shimmered in the glow of 100 chandeliers. Champagne bubbles rose in elegant flutes, the air tinged with cigar smoke, silk dresses brushing the marble floor. The stage was set for the elite, the powerful, and the ruthless to do what they did best: judge, dismiss, and gamble fortunes with the flick of a paddle. No one in the crowd, no one except a trembling stable boy, imagined that a single sale this evening, a battered thoroughbred going for a pathetic £25,000, would upend the future of British racing. Tattersall's auction house pulsed with old money and cold eyes. As the auctioneer rapped his knuckles on the mahogany podium, murmurs flowed through the rows of aristocrats and syndicate moguls. William Harrington, Jockey Club member and king of withering glances, perched in the center like a hawk over carrion. He toyed with his cufflinks, his gaze already fixed on the next lot, already dismissing the current one as a waste of breath. Suddenly, the stable doors at the far end swung wide. In strode Rebel, a bay thoroughbred, muscles quivering beneath a dull coat, head tossing as if searching for some unseen exit, eyes darting from one velvet-clad stranger to the next. The auctioneer tried to inject excitement, extolling the impeccable bloodline. But his words landed flat. In the hush, only the scuff of Rebel's hooves and the snicker of champagne glasses could be heard. At Rebel's side walked Oliver, young, lean, hands knotted white around the lead rope. His boots were worn, his jacket out of fashion, but his jaw was set with a quiet, steely resolve. In his mind, he replayed every word Harrington had spoken earlier, how some animals were simply too common, too rough to ever grace the Royal Ascot. Oliver's face burned at the memory, but he held his tongue. The bidding began, slow, reluctant, more a courtesy than a contest. 20,000, 22, a weak nod from the rear, then silence. The hammer hovered, as if embarrassed. Finally, 25,000. A ripple of laughter slid through the crowd. Pathetic amount for such a pedigree, sneered Harrington, loud enough for everyone to hear. He leaned back, sharing the joke with his equally bored companions, his voice laced with that special brand of contempt only old money could wield. For a heartbeat, the world shrank to the circle of light around Rebel and Oliver. Oliver felt his chest tighten. Tonight was supposed to be their beginning, not a punchline. He clenched his jaw, glancing at Rebel, who, for a moment, met his eyes, as if asking a question only they two could understand. As the paperwork was signed and the crowd began to shift their attention to the next lot, Harrington's voice cut through the hum. That animal will never be worth anything, not in this lifetime, not in the next. His laughter, cruel and sharp, chased Oliver as he led Rebel out of the ring, the lead rope trembling in his grip. Oliver stopped just before the doors to the loading yard, pressing his forehead to Rebel's neck, feeling the thunder of the horse's racing heart. "We'll prove them all wrong," Oliver whispered, more promise than prayer. Behind him, the auction house erupted into new bidding wars and new gossip. But for Oliver, the world had narrowed to the silent oath between a disgraced horse and a defiant young handler. He felt the shame burn away, replaced by something harder, sharper, defiance. As they moved out into the cold night, the London air thick with mist, Oliver looked back just once at the golden glow spilling from Tattersall's. In that light, Harrington and his kind seemed untouchable, unassailable, their laughter echoing like prophecy. But Oliver only gripped Rebel's halter tighter. Somewhere deep inside, he swore an oath. They might own the auction, the money, the rules, but they didn't own fate. They didn't own him. Outside, the truck rumbled to life. Rebel stamped his hooves, snorting, eyes wild, already fighting the idea of confinement. Oliver steadied him, talking low, letting his voice smooth away the panic. "Easy, boy. We're leaving all that behind. They don't know you. Don't know what you're capable of." In the cab, Oliver's phone buzzed with a message from Charlie Barnes, his boss, his mentor, a legend in her own right, though never treated as such by the racing establishment. "Don't let them get in your head, kid. Bring him home safe." "We start fresh," Oliver replied, thumbs shaking. "We'll show them. I swear it." The streets of London slipped by, streetlights flickering on stone, casting long shadows that seemed to reach for the little rig as it headed north. Rebel thrashed once in the trailer as if making his own declaration. They passed the last pub before the city faded into country, a chorus of Friday night laughter spilling into the cold. Oliver caught his own reflection in the window, face pale but eyes blazing. We're not beaten. Not yet. In that moment, it didn't matter if the whole world believed they were outclassed, outspent, out of their depth. Oliver knew the truth. Sometimes the most dangerous thing in the world is someone with nothing left to lose. Someone who's been laughed at one time too many. Tattersall's and its elite would move on. The story of the 25,000 pounds horse, a joke at the club bar, a punchline over port and cigars. But out in the dark, two exiles raced north through the fog, each with a heart full of fight. A new chapter waited at the edge of Yorkshire, and for the first time all night, Oliver smiled. "Let them laugh," he murmured. "They won't be laughing for long." Dawn broke gray and cold over the Yorkshire countryside, a sharp contrast to the gilded halls of Tattersall's they'd left behind. As the battered truck rolled past hedgerows and stone walls, the fields opened wide, mist hugging the earth. The weight of London's scorn still pressed on Oliver's chest, but each mile north felt like peeling away another layer of humiliation, replacing it with hope and the biting tang of uncertainty. They reached Barnes stables just as the sun caught the tops of the distant hills. A cluster of weather-beaten barns and paddocks, more heart than polish, stood as the last stronghold of a once proud family legacy. At the gate, Charlie Barnes herself waited, arms crossed over her chest, hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun streaked with silver. Years of grit and disappointment had etched lines into her face, but her eyes burned with the fire of someone who refused to accept defeat. As Oliver jumped from the cab, he caught the flicker of anxiety she tried to hide. "Well, kid, you got him here in one piece. That's a start," she called, voice gravelly but warm. He managed to smile, nerves jangling. He didn't make it easy. Fought the whole way. Charlie grinned, showing a crooked tooth. "Good. The best ones always do." Together they coaxed Rebel from the trailer. The horse emerged, tense and wide-eyed, nostrils flaring as he took in the new world. Less grandeur, more mud and wind, but freedom in the air if he dared to breathe it in. Charlie reached out, moving slow, letting Rebel sniff her hand. "You and me, pal. We've both been written off. Let's see if we can't turn that into an advantage." Oliver shot her a curious glance. He'd heard stories of Charlie, how she'd been a phenom in the saddle, fearless and gifted, until the old guard forced her out. But she never talked about it. Now, with Rebel shifting restlessly between them, something in her seemed to soften. "I know what it's like," Charlie said, her voice lowering as the wind picked up. "All my life, I was told there were places I didn't belong. When I was your age, I wanted to ride in the Derby more than anything. But Sebastian Harrington told me to my face, women don't belong in racing, Charlie. Not real racing." She spat the words out like poison, then shook her head. "I swore I'd never give anyone that kind of power over me again." Oliver felt something click between them, a shared defiance, a refusal to accept other people's limits. They led Rebel down the drive, past peeling fences and fields grown wild. Charlie's stride was confident, but Oliver noticed the slight limp, the way her hand trembled when she thought no one was watching. In the stables, the barn cats scattered, and a few of the old hands looked up from their chores. The main barn was filled with the sounds of morning, hay bales thumping, buckets clanking, horses snorting in their stalls. Charlie glanced around, lips pressed thin. Not much to look at, but it's home. Or it was, before things got tough. She didn't have to explain. Oliver knew money had been tight. Still, seeing it firsthand, the cracked paint, the patched roofs, the accounts ledger sitting open on a hay bale, drove the point home. Charlie waited until the other hands drifted off before she spoke again, voice low and raw. "Oliver, there's something you need to know. We owe the bank £15,000. If we can't pay it back in 30 days, they'll take everything. Barn stables will be a memory, nothing more. Oliver went cold. That's why you took a risk on Rebel. Charlie nodded. He's our last chance. I know what the world thinks of us. I know what Harrington thinks. But this isn't just about proving them wrong. It's about survival. As they settled Rebel into his new stall, Oliver noticed a battered envelope propped up on the feed bin. The return address bore the bank's insignia. A warning letter. Charlie picked it up, eyes scanning the text, her face hardening. Inspectors coming by next week, she muttered, probably to count the boards before they sell them for firewood. Oliver reached out, covering her hand with his. We're not done yet. Rebel's got more fight in him than they think, and so do we. The rest of the day passed in a blur of work, cleaning stalls, hauling water, settling Rebel. Every so often the wind would pick up, carrying the sound of laughter from the neighboring farm or the distant rumble of a tractor. Rebel remained jittery, pacing his stall, kicking at the door whenever someone came near. That evening, as they checked over his papers, Charlie let out a whistle. Hold on. Look at this. Oliver peered over her shoulder. Buried in the paperwork was a line he'd missed. Rebel's sire was none other than Crown Glory, a Triple Crown winner, a legend. No one mentioned this at the auction, Oliver said, breathless. Charlie's eyes shone with new hope. That's no accident. They hit it, probably hoping to keep the price low, maybe even to make sure he'd disappear up north and never threaten their blue blood lines again. If word gets out, things could change fast. Just then, Rebel let out a furious kick, rocking the stall, the sound echoing through the barn. He was fighting as if the past wasn't done with him yet. Charlie's expression turned grim. He's still wild. But that's what I like about him. Night fell heavy and cold. As Oliver finished the last of the chores, his phone vibrated. Another message from the bank. A second warning. He stuffed it into his pocket, jaw set. Later, after the others had turned in, Oliver found Charlie in the tack room, hands wrapped around a chipped mug of tea. The silence was thick, broken only by the distant sound of Rebel kicking at the walls. Charlie didn't look up. You ever think maybe we made a mistake, Oliver? He hesitated, then shook his head. No, not once. She managed a weak smile, then handed him the keys to the stable office. If anything happens, you're in charge, understand? Oliver nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Suddenly, a commotion outside, the sharp, frantic sound of hooves against metal. They raced to the barn to find Rebel thrashing inside the trailer, eyes wide with terror, sweat lathering his flanks. Charlie reached for the lead rope, voice steady. Easy, boy, easy. But Rebel's panic wouldn't be calmed. He kicked harder, desperate, wild. For a moment it looked like he might break free, shatter the door, run into the blackness. Oliver stepped forward, planting himself between the horse and the open yard. Rebel, it's okay. You're safe now. No more cages, no more auctions. Just us. The horse stilled, breathing hard, foam flecking his muzzle. The silence was tense, electric, as if every fate, Charlie's, Oliver's, Rebel's, hung in the air. Charlie finally exhaled, wiping her brow. Let's hope we didn't make a terrible mistake. Oliver didn't answer. He couldn't. Not yet. But as the first stars appeared in the Yorkshire sky, he made himself a promise. Whatever storms lay ahead, they'd face them together. Failure wasn't an option. Not for Rebel, not for Charlie, not for him. And far away, under another roof, the first whispers began. Of a mysterious horse up north, of old grudges and new hopes, of the kind of race that could change everything. The real journey was just beginning. Morning in Yorkshire brought no easy victories. The mist clung low over the paddocks, ghostly shapes drifting between stone walls and frostbitten grass. In the barn, Rebel stood with his ears pinned, dark eyes wary, watching every move with the intensity of an animal used to disappointment. Oliver didn't flinch. He'd seen that look in the mirror before, defiant, scared, waiting for the next letdown. Charlie called for him before dawn, her voice already scratchy with exhaustion. Let's get started. The sooner we break through, the better." She tossed him a brush, then set about her own work, moving with stubborn determination despite the limp in her step. The first training session was a test of patience and willpower. Rebel resisted every command, dancing sideways, shying from the lead rope, tossing his head with a stubbornness that bordered on rage. Oliver tried gentle words, firm pressure, even bribery with apples, but nothing worked. The horse's muscles trembled beneath his coat, sweat already darkening his flanks before the sun had fully risen. Charlie leaned on the fence, arms folded, watching Oliver struggle. He's not just wild. He's angry. Somebody did a number on him. Oliver grunted as Rebel jerked away yet again, nearly yanking the rope from his hands. "You think he's ever going to trust us?" Charlie hesitated. "I don't know. Some horses never do. But sometimes, if you show 'em enough patience, they'll surprise you." The morning dragged on, each attempt at progress ending in frustration. By noon, Oliver was nursing a bruised wrist, and Rebel paced his stall, glaring like a prisoner. Needing a break, Oliver wandered into the village for supplies. The local pub was already humming with life. Farmers swapping gossip, muddy boots propped by the fire. As he stepped inside, the talk quieted. He caught a snatch of conversation, something about the posh horse up at Barnes's, and laughter that wasn't quite friendly. "Hey, you're the new stable lad, right?" one of the men called out, a pint halfway to his lips. "Heard you brought in some fancy London horse. Good luck getting him to work up here. Yorkshire fields are no place for soft blood." Oliver tried to shrug it off. "We'll see how he does." Another man chimed in. "Harrington's lot sent up rejects before, never works out, should stick to local stock." Oliver paid for his supplies and left, the words lingering in his mind. Doubt crept in, cold and unwelcome. Back at the stable, the pressure had only grown. On the tackroom table lay a second letter from the bank, this one more urgent than the last. Final warning. 20 days remain. Immediate action required. Charlie read it, lips pressed in a thin line, but said nothing. She just moved with new urgency, checking Rebel's stall, counting feed, running her hands over his legs for signs of injury. As evening settled, Oliver found himself alone with Rebel. The barn was quiet, except for the rhythmic chewing of horses and the faint creak of the old timbers in the wind. He sat outside Rebel's stall, speaking softly. "I know what it's like, you know. Nobody believing in you. Folks looking at you like you're a mistake. That's been me, my whole life." Rebel's ears twitched, but he didn't move closer. Still, something in his posture shifted. Oliver decided to take a risk. He reached for the latch, letting the door swing open, then stepped inside, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. For a moment, Rebel tensed, muscles coiling, ready to bolt. But Oliver just stood there, arms at his sides. Minutes passed, heavy and silent. Finally, Rebel took a tentative step forward, then another. His breath washed hot over Oliver's hand. For the first time since the auction, the horse allowed the boy to touch his neck. Just for a second, but enough to feel the tremble, the wound beneath the skin. A breakthrough. Tiny, fragile, but real. That night, Oliver couldn't sleep. He found Charlie in the kitchen, poring over Rebel's old records. "Did you see this?" she asked, sliding a file across the table. "Look. There are notes here from his last trainer. Methods, not exactly gentle." Oliver read through the scribbled lines, his jaw tightening. "They beat him. No wonder he doesn't trust anyone." Charlie nodded. "It explains a lot. Means we've got more work ahead, but at least we know what we're up against." As they spoke, the rain started, tapping against the windows. Oliver felt the weight of everything: Charlie's gamble, the bank's threats, the doubt from town, Rebel's wounds, settling on his shoulders. Meanwhile, miles away, word of the mysterious Yorkshire horse began to reach London. Inside a plush office lined with racing trophies and leather-bound books, Sebastian Harrington sat with a phone pressed to his ear. "You're certain?" he asked, voice clipped and cold. A voice on the other end, one of his ever-present spies, answered, "Positive. The horse is showing spirit. Not much yet, but the boy's got him moving." Sebastian sneered, swirling his brandy. Keep watching. If there's even a hint that animal could be a threat, I want to know first. Back at Barnes' stables, Oliver prepared for another day. He woke before dawn, determined not to let yesterday's failure be the last word. The morning's routine played out much the same. Rebel tested every boundary, resisting the saddle, balking at every new command. But Oliver changed his approach, remembering what he'd read in the records. He kept his tone soft, his hands steady. He didn't punish, didn't push, just waited. By noon, the wind picked up, carrying the distant sound of engines from the village road. Then, without warning, a car backfired nearby. The sharp pop echoed across the fields, and Rebel snapped, spinning, eyes wild, crashing against the fence. Oliver jumped back as the horse bolted, tearing across the pasture, mane flying, the echo of his panic bouncing off the hills. Charlie and the other hands raced out. Oliver shouted, "Let him run! Don't chase!" Charlie grabbed his arm. "He's testing the world, not just us." For long minutes, they watched Rebel tear through the grass, every muscle screaming with fear and rage. Finally, breathless and trembling, he slowed, ears swiveling, scanning for enemies. When Oliver approached, slow and careful, Rebel didn't bolt again. Instead, he lowered his head, exhausted. Oliver stroked his neck, feeling the pulse of the horse's heart beneath his hand. "You're not alone. Not anymore," he whispered. That evening, as the last light faded, Oliver stayed with Rebel, sharing stories in the dark, about hope, about failure, about not giving up. For the first time, he saw the horse relax, shoulders dropping, the haunted look in his eyes softening. The next morning, the whole stable was buzzing. Word of Rebel's breakout and return had spread. Some locals stopped by, pretending to deliver feed or check on old friends, but really wanting to see if the posh horse was still standing. Charlie watched from the door, arms crossed, eyes glinting. "Let him talk," she said. "All that matters is what happens next." Inside, Oliver smiled at Rebel, who now watched him with cautious interest. For the first time, it felt like the impossible might not be so impossible, after all. But as they settled for the night, Oliver glanced at the stack of bank letters and the old wounds in Rebel's eyes. They weren't out of danger yet, not by a long shot. And somewhere in the distance, danger watched back, waiting for its moment. The real battle, one of trust, of will, and of racing destiny, was just beginning. The sun climbed over Yorkshire's rolling hills, gilding the frost on every stone wall and fence post. The village was waking up, smoke curling from chimneys, the air ringing with the caw of distant rooks. At Barnes' stables, a nervous kind of excitement hung in the air. Today was different. Today would be the first real test, Oliver's first attempt to ride Rebel. In the early morning chill, the entire crew gathered near the paddock. Charlie stood at the gate, bundled in her old waxed jacket, hands jammed deep in her pockets to hide the tremor in her fingers. Her face was pale and her breath came short, but her eyes burned with stubborn pride. Oliver double-checked every strap, every buckle, every seam of the tack. He moved slow, whispering softly to Rebel, making sure the saddle fit just right, not pinching or rubbing the horse's sensitive skin. The stable hands murmured among themselves, some betting quietly whether the London boy would even get a foot in the stirrup before being thrown. From the road, a handful of neighbors leaned on the fence, arms folded, faces skeptical. The tale of the expensive, soft-blooded auction horse had traveled fast, and everyone wanted to see if Barnes Stables would finally catch a break, or crash and burn in front of the whole village. Charlie gave a sharp nod. "Let's do this, Oliver. No heroics. If he spooks, bail out. We can't afford any injuries, not with what's at stake." Oliver drew a steadying breath and stepped up to Rebel's side. The horse snorted, stomping a hoof, head tossing, but Oliver kept his movements calm and deliberate. He patted Rebel's neck, murmuring encouragement, then slid a foot into the stirrup. For a moment, Rebel tensed, muscles quivering like piano wire. But he didn't bolt. Charlie's voice was taut. "Easy. Steady now. With a smooth motion, Oliver swung himself onto Rebel's back. A hush fell over the crowd. For a split second, everyone, Charlie, the hands, the neighbors, even Rebel, seemed to hold their breath. Rebel danced sideways, tossing his head, but Oliver stayed relaxed, letting the movement flow through him instead of fighting against it. "That's it, boy," he murmured. "We're just getting a feel for each other, that's all." He took up the reins, light as feathers. Rebel circled nervously, unsure, testing the limits, but gradually, the tension in his neck loosened. With each lap around the paddock, Oliver's confidence grew. He realized that riding Rebel wasn't about dominance or control. It was about trust, respect. They were partners now, equals fighting the same battle. The stable hands broke into surprised murmurs. Someone clapped, another whistled. The skepticism in their faces shifted, just a crack, but it was there. Charlie let out a long, shaky breath, her eyes shining with pride. "Would you look at that? I knew he had it in him." Oliver flashed her a quick grin as he steered Rebel in a wide arc around the paddock, letting the horse move at his own pace. They walked, then trotted, Rebel's stride lengthening as his nerves eased. By the third lap, Oliver felt the beginnings of something special. An unspoken bond, a partnership neither of them had known before. But the moment didn't last. Halfway through the next circuit, Charlie staggered at the fence, clutching her chest. Her face went ashen. She tried to call out, but her voice caught in her throat. "Charlie!" Oliver slid off Rebel and vaulted the fence, sprinting to her side as she slumped against the gatepost. The hands rushed over, crowding around in panic. Charlie tried to wave them off, her lips pressed tight. "I'm fine. I just need a minute." But Oliver saw the truth in her eyes. He steadied her, supporting her as she sank onto an overturned feed bucket. One of the older hands, Molly, dashed for the office. "Should I call a doctor?" Charlie shook her head, stubborn as ever. "No doctors. Just give me a moment. It's stress, that's all." But the tremor in her hand wouldn't go away. Oliver pressed a bottle of water into her palm. He lowered his voice so only she could hear. "Don't lie to me, Charlie. Are you sick?" She met his gaze, pain flickering behind her bravado. "It's just my heart. Been bothering me more lately. But I'll be damned if I let those bastards at the bank or Harrington see me on the ground." Oliver squeezed her hand, fiercely protective. "We need you. Don't push too hard." Charlie managed a tight smile. "You and Rebel need me more than ever. I'll rest after we win." But rest was not on the agenda. That afternoon, a black Mercedes pulled up the drive, tires crunching on gravel. A man in a crisp suit stepped out. Mr. Price, the bank inspector. He looked around with thinly veiled disdain, jotting notes as he inspected the barns and paddocks. Every flaw, every patch, every cracked board went into his little notebook. He stopped in front of Charlie, eyes narrowed. "Miss Barnes, I'm afraid the bank cannot overlook your arrears much longer. Unless you can demonstrate significant improvement immediately, the foreclosure process will begin within the week." Charlie bristled. "We're turning things around. You can see for yourself." Mr. Price sniffed, unconvinced. "We'll be in touch. I suggest you prepare yourselves for the worst." He got back in his car, the engine purring as he drove away, leaving a cloud of exhaust and dread behind him. As night fell, the pressure pressed down harder than ever. The hands went home, whispering about Charlie's collapse and the inspector's threats. Oliver sat alone in the tack room, head in his hands. The weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders, heavier than ever. He heard Rebel's restless shifting in the barn and walked out, moonlight spilling through the open doors. He stood in the dark, looking at the horse who had become his last hope. "It's just us now, buddy," he whispered, stroking Rebel's neck. "Everything depends on this." Rebel leaned into his touch, no longer the wild, skittish creature from Tattersall's. In the silence, Oliver felt the bond between them deepen, forged not by triumph, but by shared struggle and stubborn hope. He looked back at the empty house, the cracked windows glowing faintly with lamplight, and the battered barn that still stood, barely, against the winds of change. The future was a storm on the horizon, full of unknowns. But for the first time, Oliver didn't feel alone. He had Rebel. He had Charlie, even with her failing heart. Together, they would fight. The night was quiet, but inside, a fire was building. Tomorrow would be another test. But Oliver had made up his mind. They would not give up, not now, not ever. The following morning broke wild and blustery. The sky was a gray sheet, wind rattling the barn doors, a storm brewing somewhere beyond the moors. Oliver stood in the center of the paddock, lead rope in hand, determination burning beneath the fatigue that had settled into his bones. Today was the day he and Charlie had set for Rebel's first real speed test. Charlie joined him, her face drawn, eyes shadowed with worry. "Take it slow. No heroics," she cautioned, glancing at the storm clouds. But the fear in her voice wasn't just about the weather. Oliver nodded, masking his own nerves. He clipped the line to Rebel's halter and led him out into the open field, the earth soft underfoot, the wind whipping their hair. Rebel tossed his head, tail flicking with impatience. The stable hands gathered along the fence, arms crossed, doubt etched in every line of their faces. The Yorkshire crowd had seen Promise collapse before, and most of them didn't think today would be any different. Oliver took a deep breath. "All right, boy. Just like we practiced. Let's see what you got." He gave the signal. Rebel broke into a trot, then a canter, but the moment Oliver urged him to open up, to really run, something changed. Rebel's ears pinned back, his stride faltered, and suddenly he reared, wild-eyed and snorting, refusing to go any faster. For a heart-stopping instant, Oliver thought he might flip over. He held his ground, arms outstretched, trying to calm the animal. The crowd muttered. Charlie winced, gripping the rail. "Let him go, Oliver. Don't push." But Oliver refused to quit. He stepped closer, voice low, steady. "It's all right. I'm not here to hurt you. You're not in the auction anymore. You're safe, Rebel. Trust me." Rebel stood, shaking, sweat darkening his flanks, nostrils wide. Oliver saw the terror in his eyes and suddenly understood. This wasn't defiance. It was fear, not of him, but of believing that things could actually change. That hope wasn't just another setup for pain. A memory flashed through Oliver's mind, standing as a kid outside the gates of a private racecourse, watching boys in crisp uniforms laughing at his tattered boots, telling him he'd never belong. That pain, that hunger to prove himself, was the same thing he saw in Rebel now. He spoke softly. "You and me, we don't trust easy, do we? But you've got to try. I promise. I'll never give up on you." Charlie limped into the field, waving off the onlookers. "He's not afraid of us, Oliver. He's afraid to believe he's good enough. You need to reach him. Here." She pressed a hand over her heart. Oliver nodded, fresh resolve hardening his features. He unclipped the lead, stepping back. "Let's try again, but your way this time. No ropes, no pressure." He walked beside Rebel, not leading, just walking, letting the horse choose his own pace. Slowly, tentatively, Rebel followed. A few yards later, Oliver broke into a jog, and to his amazement, Rebel kept pace, not running from fear, but matching him stride for stride. Charlie watched, hope glinting in her eyes. "That's it. You're showing him trust." Suddenly, one of the stable hands called out. A delivery truck was idling by the gates, driver waving for someone to sign. Charlie frowned. "We didn't order anything." Suspicion flickered in her gaze. She hobbled over to inspect the bags being unloaded. The labels looked wrong. Wrong feed company, different sacks. Charlie's instincts screamed. She grabbed a handful and let it sift through her fingers. The smell slightly off. "No, stop!" she shouted, waving for the driver. "Take this back! We didn't order from you." The driver shrugged, mumbled something about a mix-up, and left in a hurry. Charlie narrowed her eyes, heart pounding. Sabotage? It wouldn't be the first time rival stables had played dirty. She kept the incident to herself, but it nagged at her as she returned to the paddock. Oliver was now running full out, Rebel galloping beside him, until a crack of thunder split the sky. The wind whipped up, cold rain stinging their faces. Rebel spooked, panic rising, but Oliver kept his voice calm, anchoring them both. The storm swept in with a vengeance. Lightning forked across the moors, illuminating the old barn in stark flashes. The hands ran for shelter, but Oliver and Charlie stayed outside, Rebel's panic threatening to spiral. The world was chaos, thunder, wind, fear, and for a moment it seemed as if everything would come undone. Oliver grabbed Rebel's halter, locking eyes with the terrified animal. "Don't let the past win. Not tonight." A bolt of lightning struck a nearby tree, the crack so loud it rattled Oliver's teeth. Rebel reared, pawing at the sky, rain pouring off his hide. For a heartbeat, Oliver thought he'd lost him for good. But then, miraculously, Rebel turned back, pressing against Oliver's side, trembling but present, not running. Charlie rushed over, soaked to the skin, coughing. "That horse isn't broken. He's just waiting for someone to believe in him. Don't you dare give up, Oliver." Oliver hugged Rebel's neck, rain mixing with tears he didn't bother to hide. "We're still here. We're still fighting." The storm raged on, but the three of them stood their ground. When the worst had passed, the farm was battered, branches down, the roof leaking, but still standing. Charlie slumped on a hay bale, shivering but smiling through her exhaustion. Tonight changed something. I could see it. He chose to come back. That's trust, Oliver. Real trust. Oliver nodded, glancing down at Rebel, who stood quietly beside him, head lowered. "We're not finished yet, not by a long shot." But in the distance, headlights glowed on the far road. In a sleek black sedan, Sebastian Harrington listened to a whispered report from his man at the auction. "The bloodline's been discovered, sir. They know who Rebel's sire is. If this gets out," Sebastian's expression hardened, "then we make sure it doesn't, whatever it takes." Back at Barnes Stables, Oliver watched the storm clouds break apart, revealing a sliver of starlit sky. The danger wasn't over. If anything, it was just beginning. But tonight, against all odds, they'd found something stronger than fear. Tomorrow would bring new battles, inside and out. But for the first time, Oliver dared to believe. Rebel would run again, and this time the world would have to watch. Yorkshire thunder shook the earth all night, rolling over the stables in deep, angry waves. Rain drummed on the old tin roof, leaking through the corners, soaking the straw and chilling the bones of everyone sheltering inside. The world felt unsteady, caught between disaster and hope, while the wind howled like a warning no one wanted to hear. But by dawn, a strange hush had settled. Oliver woke on the tackroom cot, boots still on, heart pounding from dreams he couldn't remember. He stumbled outside, the air thick with the scent of wet earth and electricity. In the paddock, Rebel paced restlessly, his bay coat slick with rain, nostrils flaring. Charlie was already there, her jacket pulled tight, eyes rimmed red from a sleepless night. "We have to push the boundary today," she said quietly. "He's ready. Or as ready as he'll ever be." Oliver nodded, feeling a new edge of desperation. The storm had bought them a little more time by delaying the bank's visit, but not much. Bills still piled up, Charlie's cough was getting worse, and rumors about the bloodline had started leaking through the racing underground. If they didn't do something spectacular, and soon, Barnes Stables would be just another ghost story. He brought Rebel to the center of the sodden field, the mud sucking at his boots. Lightning had sheared a branch off the old oak, its wood splintered and sharp, but Oliver ignored it. The world had shrunk down to this, the boy, the horse, the impossible dream. Charlie watched from under the eaves, her hands trembling as she wrapped them around a chipped thermos. "Go on, Oliver. Let him go. All the way." For the first time, Oliver didn't bother with the halter. He stood in the drizzle, meeting Rebel's wild eyes, and simply opened the gate. No ropes, no commands, just freedom. For a split second, Rebel hesitated, ears flicking, muscles taut. Then, as if struck by a sudden revelation, he exploded forward. The power was staggering, more than any of them had ever seen. Rebel shot across the field like a force of nature, hooves churning up mud, tail flying, every stride a rebellion against everything that had ever tried to cage him. Oliver sprinted alongside for a few paces, laughing breathlessly. "That's it! Go, Rebel, go!" Rebel wasn't running from fear anymore. He was running for himself, toward freedom, toward possibility. The rain blurred the world, but even through the downpour, Oliver could see the horse's transformation. Each stride was stronger, surer, as if the storm had burned away the last of his doubt. Charlie's voice broke through the wind. "Clock him, Oliver! Don't just stare!" Oliver fumbled for the battered stopwatch in his pocket, thumb pressing hard. He watched, heart hammering, as Rebel made a full circuit of the field, then another. The numbers on the watch spun faster than he thought possible. When Rebel finally skidded to a stop, sides heaving, Oliver looked at the time and went cold. He ran to Charlie, thrusting the stopwatch into her hand. She squinted at the digits, disbelief dawning. "This can't be right." Oliver shook his head, awestruck. "It's real. That's Royal Ascot speed, at least. Maybe faster." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The rain softened, washing away months of fear and disappointment. Charlie limped across the paddock, dragging her weak leg, and wrapped her arms around Rebel's neck. Tears streaked her muddy cheeks. "You did it, boy. You really did it." Oliver dropped to his knees in the mud, overcome. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every ounce of pain, it had all been worth it. Rebel nuzzled his shoulder, breathing slow and steady, as if he too understood what they'd just achieved. The moment didn't last long. From the edge of the field, a shadow moved. A figure in a raincoat, notebook in hand. It was the same man who'd watched the auction, now scribbling furiously, his eyes never leaving Rebel. Charlie noticed first, her expression sharpening. "That's not a local?" The man disappeared before Oliver could confront him, but the damage was done. Back in London, Sebastian Harrington's phone rang as the sun broke through the clouds. "It's true, sir," his spy reported breathlessly. "They've got something special up there. I saw it with my own eyes. If they get him to Royal Ascot..." Sebastian's jaw tightened. "That will not happen. Do whatever it takes." Back at Barnes Stables, Charlie and Oliver huddled over the kitchen table, the stopwatch lying between them like a holy relic. The storm had forced the bank to delay their inspector's next visit, a small mercy. They now had maybe 2 more weeks. It would have to be enough. "We have to enter him," Charlie said, voice shaking with excitement and fear. "Royal Ascot, it's the only way." Oliver bit his lip, thinking of the costs, the logistics, the politics of racing at that level. But he saw the hope in Charlie's eyes, the way her hands finally stopped shaking when she looked at the stopwatch. "We'll make it work," he promised. "We have to." They threw themselves into training, the days blurring into a rhythm of work, worry, and wonder. Rebel improved with every session, learning not just to run, but to listen, to trust, to believe. Word spread through the local stables. Barnes had a miracle horse, and the outsiders began to come. Journalists, rival trainers, even a few rich Londoners in shiny boots, who offered wads of cash to buy him out before he could ever race. Charlie refused them all, sometimes slamming the phone down so hard the whole kitchen rattled. "He's not for sale," she growled. "He's family." But Sebastian's network moved faster than rumors. Bribes were offered to rival jockeys, veiled threats muttered at supply shops, and one night, someone cut the phone line to the barn. Oliver found the wire the next morning, hanging loose, and his stomach twisted. "Are we in danger?" he asked Charlie. She shrugged, but her eyes were hard. "We're always in danger, Oliver. That's what happens when you threaten the powerful." The storms returned, but so did the miracles. One morning, Rebel bested his own time by a full second, and Charlie collapsed into a chair, weeping with joy and relief. The breakthrough had come, not just for Rebel, but for them all. The storm had freed them. The fear was still there, lurking. But it was no longer the master. And as the week closed, the sun finally broke through, lighting up Barnes Stables in a rare, golden glow. The fields sparkled, the mud hardened, and for a moment, hope felt real. But a letter arrived, the seal unbroken, the handwriting unmistakable. Charlie read it in silence, then passed it to Oliver. "He knows," she whispered. "Lord Sebastian, he's coming for us." Oliver closed his eyes, feeling the storm gathering all over again. But this time, he was ready. So was Charlie. So was Rebel. They'd faced the worst the world could throw at them, and survived. Now, the real fight was about to begin. The days that followed were a blur of tension, hope, and exhaustion. Yorkshire's weather finally relented, offering crisp blue mornings and evenings painted with streaks of gold and lavender. For the first time in weeks, Barnes stables buzzed, not with dread, but with a cautious kind of optimism. But every moment of joy was tempered by an undercurrent of dread. Sebastian Harrington's shadow stretched long across the hills. With the Royal Ascot entry looming, training grew more intense than ever. Each session began at sunrise and ended only when both horse and rider were slick with sweat and dirt. Oliver grew lean and sharp, his eyes ringed with fatigue but burning with determination. Charlie's limp became more pronounced, but she refused to rest. She barked orders from the sidelines, stopwatch dangling from her neck, heart pounding with every gallop. For both of them, there was no option but to succeed. The bank's next visit was days away, and without victory, everything would vanish. Stables, land, home, and hope. But the rest of Britain was waking up to the rumors, too. First, a pair of local journalists arrived, then a regional TV crew, then slick reporters from the national press. They crowded the fence, waving microphones and cameras, hungry for a story about the Underdog horse and the woman everyone said was washed up. Rebel performed with a grace that made even the cynics go quiet. News of his impossible speed traveled faster than the spring wind, and soon betting boards and smoky pubs from York to London began to shift their odds. Charlie, wary but savvy, used the attention. "Let them talk, Oliver. The more noise, the harder it'll be for them to shut us out." Still, she kept one wary eye on every stranger, knowing that not all attention was good. Then came the sabotage. It started with whispers, offers of bribes to rival trainers, rumors that Barnes's entry paperwork had mysteriously disappeared. One evening, Oliver caught a man in a suit slipping out of the feed shed. The man vanished before Oliver could stop him. But the message was clear. They were being watched, and not just by fans. One afternoon, as Oliver cooled Rebel down after a blistering sprint, Charlie hurried over, face pale. "Look at this." She handed him a creased envelope. Inside was a letter, the words cut out from magazines. "Withdraw from Ascot or face consequences. This is your last warning." Oliver stared at the message, anger boiling in his chest. "They're trying to scare us off." Charlie's lips twisted in a defiant grin. "They're scared. That means we're winning. But keep your eyes open. People like Sebastian don't play fair." Sabotage attempts became more blatant. Someone loosened Rebel's stall latch in the night. Another time, Oliver found broken glass scattered at the entrance to the main paddock. He and Charlie doubled security, locking up everything and sleeping in shifts. In the midst of chaos, the stable pulled together like never before. Molly, the senior hand, slept in the hayloft with an old shotgun by her side. The younger hands, once skeptical, became fiercely loyal. They worked overtime, patching fences, mucking stalls, watching every gate and visitor. Even the locals who'd once gossiped now rallied around Barnes stables, delivering fresh feed, fixing equipment, chasing off suspicious strangers. As the days ticked down to the big race, the racing authorities sent notice. There would be a final review of all entries, and rumors swirled that someone in London was lobbying to have Rebel's license revoked. Charlie stormed into the farmhouse, slamming the letter onto the kitchen table. "They want us out, Oliver. They'll do anything to keep the bloodline out of Ascot." Oliver felt panic rise, but pushed it back. "We won't give them the satisfaction. We'll play by their rules, but we're not backing down." Rebel, for his part, grew stronger, more confident, almost regal. He started each morning with an eager nicker, ears pricked forward, ready to work. Oliver learned to trust him completely, to sense his moods and strengths. On the track, they moved like one body. Oliver barely needing to guide the reins. As the pressure grew, so did the sense of unity. Late one night, the whole stable, staff, neighbors, even a couple of rival trainers from down the road, gathered in the barn for a last strategy meeting. Charlie stood before them, voice hoarse but proud. They're going to try to take this from us, one way or another. But we know the truth. This isn't just about a race. It's about all the small stables, all the people who were told they didn't belong, didn't matter. If we win, we don't just save our home. We show them the world doesn't belong to the likes of Sebastian Harrington. She raised her mug of tea, and everyone followed. To Rebel, and to all of us who never gave up. The barn erupted in cheers. Even Rebel seemed to understand. He tossed his head and nickered, stamping his hoof as if claiming his place among them. The next day, the betting boards in London shifted again. Underground gambling rings whispered that the Northern Miracle was the horse to beat, and the establishment's nerves were starting to show. Bribes got bigger, threats more direct. One of Charlie's rivals was offered £10,000 to accidentally block Rebel during the race. The man refused and went straight to Charlie with the news. "They're desperate," he told her. "They're scared you might actually pull it off." The stakes were higher than ever. The racing board sent yet another threatening letter hinting at irregularities in Rebel's paperwork. Charlie and Oliver spent sleepless nights hunting through files, tracking down signatures and bloodline documents, determined not to give anyone the excuse they needed to shut them out. Then, just as hope seemed about to slip away, they received confirmation. Barnes Stables and Rebel were officially entered into the Royal Ascot. The news hit the national papers. And suddenly, the world was watching. Charlie read the acceptance letter 3 times, then pressed it to her heart. "We made it, Oliver." "We actually made it." Oliver grinned, exhaustion forgotten for a moment. "Now, all we have to do is win." But Charlie's smile faded as she gazed out the window, the hills rolling dark beneath a sky full of storm clouds. Winning's never been harder, not with all the world against us. Oliver put a steady hand on her shoulder. "We're not alone, Charlie. Not anymore." And outside, in the golden light of dusk, Rebel lifted his head and watched the horizon, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. The battle lines were drawn. The world was watching, and for the first time, it felt like maybe, just maybe, the little stable from Yorkshire had a real chance at glory. The Royal Ascot was everything Oliver and Charlie had imagined, and 10 times more intimidating. The day of the race dawned bright and blue, but Oliver barely noticed the weather as their battered truck rumbled through the ornate iron gates. Security in blazers and white gloves checked credentials with practiced boredom, barely glancing at the battered Barnes Stables sign hanging crooked from the trailer. It didn't matter. They all knew who didn't belong. Beyond the gates, the world transformed. Perfectly manicured lawns stretched for miles, dotted with silk tents, luxury cars, and women in elaborate hats, laughing like they owned the sunlight. The air crackled with energy, aristocrats mingling with millionaires, photographers snapping at every turn, racing officials and bookies whispering behind gold-rimmed sunglasses. Oliver swallowed hard, suddenly conscious of every patch on his shirt, every scuff on his boots. Rebel stepped down from the trailer, tail swishing, eyes bright but wary. Even the horses here looked different, sleek, muscled, their grooms dressed in crisp uniforms. The murmurs began as soon as Rebel set hoof on the grounds. "That's the Yorkshire horse," someone whispered. "The one they say can run like the wind, if he doesn't bolt first." Charlie brushed past, chin held high, her battered boots sinking into the expensive turf. "Let them talk," she muttered. But Oliver could see her fists clench with every sideways glance. This wasn't just a race. It was a war between worlds. They made their way to the stable area, greeted by stares and the sharp scent of jealousy. Even the grooms of the biggest names eyed Rebel with suspicion. The stables were palatial, banners flying the colors of old money, blue, gold, crimson. Barnes Stables had none. They hung a simple sign above Rebel's stall and set about brushing the dust from his coat. A royal procession passed by, The Queen's representatives in tailored morning suits, security bustling all around. Charlie nudged Oliver. "Remember this, kid. Don't let them see you blink. If we act like we belong, maybe they'll start to believe it." But the pressure was relentless. Every moment someone seemed to be checking their papers, double-checking Rebels' registration, sniffing for a reason to send them packing. At the registration tent, an officious woman with perfect lipstick raised an eyebrow at Charlie's accent. "Barnes Stables? From Yorkshire, is it?" she asked, eyes skimming the documents. "Yes, ma'am," Charlie said coolly, refusing to shrink away. "You'll find everything's in order." Behind them, Lord Sebastian Harrington arrived, flanked by a pack of journalists and his gleaming thoroughbred, Windsor's Pride, a mountain of muscle and arrogance, coat so glossy it looked fake. Sebastian barely glanced at Charlie and Oliver. His media handler barked instructions, photographers snapping as he patted his champion's neck, but Sebastian couldn't resist a last dig. "You made it all the way down from the hills, did you?" His voice was smooth as silk, venom under the surface. "I hope you enjoy the spectacle, Miss Barnes. Pity you'll be back home before the sun sets." Charlie only smiled, slow and sharp. "Better be careful, Sebastian. Sometimes the underdog bites." The crowd surged around Windsor's Pride, but a few eyes lingered on Rebel, the oddsmakers, the punters, the true horsemen who saw something fierce in his stride. Oliver caught their glances and felt a flicker of pride. Back at their stall, the atmosphere was electric. Molly was there, fussing over Rebel's bridle. A pair of local reporters, flown in at their own expense, recorded every word, capturing the moment Yorkshire's last hope prepared to battle the British elite. But the tension was sky high. Just as Oliver finished tacking Rebel, a commotion erupted at the far end of the stables. A rival jockey stormed in, voice shaking. "Someone tried to bribe me. Offered £10,000 to make sure Barnes's horse didn't finish the race." Officials rushed over, questions flying. The story spread like wildfire. By the time it reached the press tent, the number had doubled, and suddenly, the scandal was everywhere. Charlie seized the moment, stepping up to the microphones. "We didn't come here to play politics. We came to run. We represent every small stable that never got a chance, every rider who was told to go home. We're not here to take part in anyone's games. We're here to race. And win or lose, we're not backing down." The statement went viral in minutes. For the first time, cheers broke out for Barnes Stables, not just from the underdog crowd, but from rivals who'd suffered the same exclusion, the same old money arrogance. Even the racing board, seeing the eyes of the nation on them, hesitated before making any more trouble. But the pressure only ratcheted up. In the final moments before the race, Oliver discovered a technical sabotage. The starting gate Rebel was assigned to had been tampered with, the mechanism jammed to stick shut at the bell. Charlie's voice went icy. "If we hadn't checked, they'd have kept him locked in while the rest of the field took off." They raced to the stewards. For a terrifying minute, it looked like they wouldn't be allowed to fix it. "Technical issues are part of racing," one official said coldly, until the gathered reporters and crowd began shouting for fairness. Under pressure, the board caved. The gate was repaired at the last minute, but the delay meant the whole event schedule shifted. Other owners fumed. Harrington fumed even louder. But the world was watching now. There would be no more easy tricks. Back at the starting line, Oliver stroked Rebel's nose, whispering words only the horse could hear. "No matter what happens, we do this together. For Charlie. For all of us." Across the track, Windsor's Pride pawed the ground, Sebastian glowering from the VIP box. The grandstands glittered with royalty and wealth, but in that moment, Oliver saw something else. A sea of regular people, watching for a miracle, waiting to see if one horse from the hills could break the world wide open. Charlie took his hand for just a second, her grip fierce. "They think this is a class war, Oliver. Let's give them a revolution." He grinned, nerves burning away, replaced by something harder. "We're ready." The call went out. Jockeys to their mounts, horses to the gates. Rebel walked tall, head high, the roar of the crowd rising all around him. As they waited for the signal, Charlie caught Oliver's eye from the rail, her voice steady even as her hands shook. No matter what, you've already won. Don't let them take that away. A long, tense silence. The officials worked to fix the last gate. The crowd buzzed, restless. Cameras flashed. Reporters jabbered. The whole world seemed to hold its breath. And then, as the final gate locked into place, the starter's flag rose, hovering, suspended on the edge of history. This was it. Everything they'd ever fought for, everything they were, balanced on the line. And as the bell finally sounded, Oliver felt rebels surge beneath him, not with fear, but with power and promise. No matter what happened next, they had already changed the game. But as the horses burst from the gates, one thought echoed in Oliver's mind. We belong here. And today, the world will see it. The world narrowed to a single line of gates, stretching across the emerald track. Cameras flashed from the grandstand. The noise of the crowd, a sea of hats, flags, and voices, rumbled through Oliver's chest as he settled into the saddle. Rebel tensed beneath him, muscle and spirit coiled tight, nostrils flaring at the scent of anticipation and old, deep rivalry. Across the line, Windsor's pride glared, nostrils white, the embodiment of breeding and entitlement. Lord Sebastian's icy gaze met Oliver's for a brief moment. Even from 100 yards away, the threat was clear. There would be no mercy. Not from the establishment, not on this field. A hush rippled through the stands. The bell clanged, the gates flew open, Rebel shot forward like a thunderbolt. Oliver could barely hear Charlie's voice over the roar of the crowd, but he felt her will in every heartbeat. Instinct and training became one. He let Rebel settle into his natural stride, refusing to be baited by the early frenzy. Windsor's pride surged to the front. Sebastian's jockey, ruthless and seasoned, angling for a perfect lane. Commentators buzzed overhead. Barnes' stables, holding back. Is it nerves or strategy? Windsor's pride sets a punishing pace. The Yorkshire Miracles got ground to make up. Oliver blocked it all out. Every cell focused on the rhythm between him and Rebel. Breath, heartbeat, hoofbeat. The first turn was a tangle of bodies and turf. A rival horse, subtly nudged by a jockey with a fat envelope in his pocket, tried to edge Rebel into the rail. Oliver guided them away, losing precious ground but keeping them safe. Midway down the backstretch, the race took on a new rhythm. Windsor's pride led, 2 lengths clear, the pack fighting for position behind. Rebel galloped at a measured pace, holding something in reserve, as Charlie had drilled him time and time again. Oliver could feel the energy building beneath him, the horse waiting for the signal, waiting to be trusted. He murmured, "Not yet, boy. Not yet." At the halfway mark, the commentary grew more heated. It's Windsor's pride, followed by Her Majesty's favorite and Golden Luck. Barnes's Rebel boxed in at the rear. Have they left it too late? The crowd's tension was palpable. In the royal box, the Queen's representative watched with unreadable eyes. In the pit, Sebastian stood at the edge of the rail, lips pressed thin, already imagining his victory speech. Suddenly, at the third turn, a rival jockey swerved, clipping Rebel's flank. For a heartbeat, Oliver felt the horse stagger. Gasps rang out, and for an instant it seemed as if everything, the dream, the years, the fight, was about to end in disaster. But Rebel's head shot up, fire flaring in his eyes. Instead of shying away, he dug in, finding balance, surging forward with a power Oliver had never felt before. Oliver steadied him, breathing deep, letting Rebel find his own lane. They slipped through a narrow gap, too small for fear, just wide enough for hope. With 2 furlongs left, the crowd was screaming. Barnes's Rebel, making a move. Look at him go! The commentators, voices rising, barely hid their surprise, or their bias. It's still Windsor's pride, but here comes the Northern Challenger? What heart! In the stands, a ripple of disbelief spread, then excitement. People rose to their feet, hats forgotten, drawn into the spectacle of an impossible challenge. Sebastian's jockey saw them coming and cut across, trying to block Rebel's path. Oliver tightened his grip, refusing to be bullied. Not today, he whispered. This is our race. He steered Rebel outside, forcing them into the widest part of the track, sacrificing precious yards for a clear shot at the finish. The move cost them time, but Rebel seemed to sense the urgency. He surged again, muscles bunching, every stride a declaration that the world's judgment meant nothing here. Down the final stretch, it was chaos. Hooves thundered, dirt flew, horses and jockeys shouted warnings and curses. Windsor's Pride still led, but the gap was closing, first a length, then half, then a nose. Charlie's scream from the rail carried across the grass. Now, Oliver, now. He loosened the reins, trusting Rebel completely. The horse responded like a living storm, unleashing everything he'd saved for this moment. The crowd's roar was deafening, the finish line rushing closer, the world telescoping to that single white stripe. For one wild, impossible second, Windsor's Pride and Rebel were neck and neck. Sebastian's jockey tried to lean in, to force Rebel wide, but Oliver held his ground, every muscle screaming. The world seemed to freeze. Camera flashes stuttered, hearts stopped. The two horses lunged together, nose to nose, at the line. It was too close to call. Oliver heard nothing but the thunder of his own pulse. He glanced at Rebel, breathless, shining, proud. All around, the grandstands erupted into pandemonium. Commentators shouted, officials gestured wildly, desperate to sort out the finish. Across the track, Sebastian glared, disbelief etched on his face. Charlie stood with her fists pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. The steward's inquiry was immediate. Replays flashed on giant screens, angles dissected in slow motion. The photo finish, frame after frame, showed two blurs, impossibly close, the difference a single breath. An official's voice boomed over the loudspeaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, the result is under review. Please remain in your seats. This could change everything." The grandstand held its breath. Oliver slid from Rebel's back, legs shaking, every muscle spent. He pressed his forehead to the horse's neck, whispering words only Rebel could hear. "You did it. No matter what they say, you did it." Charlie pushed through the crowd, flinging her arms around them both. "You're a champion, Oliver, both of you. Even if they rob us blind, you prove them all wrong." Officials huddled. The crowd grew restless. Whispers of sabotage, politics, and class warfare swirled through the royal boxes and beer gardens alike. Oliver, still dizzy with adrenaline, looked up at the scoreboard, waiting for the world to decide if hope was enough to cross a finish line. Minutes passed. Eternities, really. Before, the speaker crackled to life again. "The stewards are reviewing possible interference between Barnes's Rebel and Windsor's Pride in the final furlong. Result pending?" The inquiry would take time. But the battle was not over. The nation watched. Divided by money and history, but united in suspense. Oliver squeezed Charlie's hand. Rebel nuzzled close. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel small. He didn't feel out of place. He felt like he belonged, right here, at the heart of the storm. The next words would change everything, for better or worse. But in this breathless silence, before fate's verdict, Oliver allowed himself to believe. Sometimes the world really could be changed by those who refused to quit. A hush settled over Royal Ascot, an almost holy silence after the thunder and chaos of the race. Oliver, still clutching Rebel's reins, stood with Charlie by his side, sweat and mud streaked across his face, his heart thundering as he waited for the world to decide their fate. The crowd's energy hovered on a razor's edge, thousands of breaths suspended in a single, electric moment. High above, on the giant screen, the image of the finish froze and magnified, two noses stretching toward the white stripe, neither giving an inch. Officials huddled, radios crackling. The announcer's voice shook as he tried to fill the void. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. The result is coming. It's the closest finish we've ever seen." Charlie gripped Oliver's shoulder, tears shining in her eyes. "No matter what they say, you made history today." Across the parade ring, Sebastian Harrington paced like a caged lion, his perfectly cut suit now rumpled, his face flushed with anger. Windsor's Pride pawed the grass, snorting, ears flicking at the tension. For a moment, even Sebastian's army of supporters seemed uncertain, glancing between the screens and their furious patron. Then at last the loudspeakers crackled. After careful review of the photo finish, the stewards have made their decision. The world seemed to stop. The winner of the Royal Ascot is Barnes's Rebel by a nose. The eruption was seismic. It started as a cheer, then a roar that shook the grandstands, sweeping through every row of spectators, through the press tent, through the crowded pubs watching live across Yorkshire and London. Rebel threw his head up, whinnying loud enough for the Queen's horses to prick their ears. Oliver gasped, choking on the sudden, impossible realization. Charlie burst into tears, laughing and sobbing all at once. She hugged Oliver so hard he almost fell. "We did it! You did it!" For a moment, everything was pure light. The years of struggle, the nights of doubt, the near losses and broken dreams, all swept away in a tide of vindication. The announcer shouted above the chaos, "It's an historic victory. Barnes Stables, a small family stable from Yorkshire, have beaten the best the world can offer." A royal official, dressed in impeccable morning coat, approached, flanked by security. The Queen's representative offered Charlie a handshake. "Her Majesty sends her congratulations. You and your horse have brought honor to this place." Charlie blinked away tears, her hand trembling in the official's grip. "Thank you, sir. This horse, he belongs to everyone who's ever been told they weren't enough." As Rebel was led into the winner's circle, the cameras flashed so bright that Oliver could hardly see. The crowd pressed forward, clamoring for a closer look. Reporters shouted questions, microphones jostling as officials brought forward a giant silver trophy. Oliver stood by Rebel's side, one hand on the horse's neck. When Sebastian approached, his lips thin with bitterness, the world seemed to go quiet again. Sebastian's voice was ice. "Name your price, anything you want. I'll buy him from you right now." Oliver shook his head, the old fear gone, replaced by quiet certainty. "Some things money can't buy, your lordship. This is Yorkshire pride. This is family." Sebastian stared at him for a long, cold moment, then turned and stalked away, trailed by his silent entourage. For the first time, he looked old, out of step with a world that had finally shifted beneath his feet. The celebration swept over the grounds. In the press tent, the Underdog story dominated every headline. Barnes's Rebel, the miracle horse from the moors, the woman jockey who defied the old order, the young trainer who never gave up. In every pub, in every home in Yorkshire, the name Rebel was on everyone's lips. But for Charlie, the sweetest moment came not from the cameras, or the trophy, or the Queen's handshake. It was the feeling in her chest. Her heart, so battered and strained, now lighter than air. She felt strong, years younger, lifted by joy and relief. In the doctor's tent, after the race, the medic took her pulse and smiled. "Looks like you'll be around for the next one, Miss Barnes." Financial salvation came swift. Sponsors and well-wishers lined up to offer support. The bank's inspector, red-faced, arrived 2 days later with a stack of congratulatory letters instead of foreclosure papers. Barnes Stables' debts were paid in full by a syndicate of small-town investors in a wave of donations from across the country. The little stable that almost closed now had a future as bright as any in England. The legacy grew. Oliver, once a dismissed stable hand, was hailed as a genius in the press. Rebel became a living legend, the horse that united a fractured sport and inspired thousands. He stood at stud, siring foals with the same wild heart and fierce spirit. Riders came from across the country, boys and girls who'd been told no by the old guard, hoping to find their place in the new world Barnes and Rebel had carved open. At the heart of it all was Charlie. Her name, once a byword for failure among the elites, became a symbol of grit and grace. She watched as Barnes Stables bloomed, as new horses and new hope filled the fields. Every morning she walked the paddocks, her limp a little less, her smile a little brighter. On a crisp fall morning, months after the race, Charlie, Oliver, and Rebel stood by the paddock fence, watching the new foals play in the dew. Charlie rested a hand on Oliver's shoulder. "We changed things, didn't we? Not just for us, for everyone who needed to believe." Oliver nodded, tears prickling his eyes. Rebels showed us, worth isn't given by people who never believed in you. It's proved by those who stand with you, no matter what. Charlie smiled, brushing Rebel's mane. That's the legacy. That's the lesson. And so, the story became legend. The tale of Barnes's Rebel was told in schools and pubs and racetracks across the world, not just as a story of a race, but of people who refused to let others decide their fate. For every child who felt small, for every dreamer shut out by closed doors, Rebel's victory shone like a beacon. And whenever the odds seemed impossible, Yorkshire folk would smile and say, "Remember, Rebel, true worth is determined by those who believe, not those who reject."